Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express, and as always, I hope you enjoy the journey ahead. On this episode, we're diving into Russia's growing influence in Libya and why that should matter to every single one of us. But first, a disclaimer. If you came here expecting an exciting travel show about the best spots to sip mint tea in Tripoli, you're in the wrong place. Instead, we're talking realpolitik, shadowy mercenaries, and Europe's southern flank. Fun, right? And for those of you wondering, wait, Russia is in Libya? How? Why? It's a situation that's in fact been simmering for a few years. So, let's get into it. Here's our latest report on the issue.
This is the Russian naval base in Tartus, Syria. It is Moscow's only port in the Mediterranean Sea, one of, if not the most important seas in the world. And it is possible that Russia is giving up this vital base. Without it, Russian influence in the Mediterranean would be incredibly reduced. According to the website Naval News, which focuses on maritime reports, the last Russian submarine has left the port. There are currently no submarines stationed there. Though whether this is part of some sort of planned rotation or a full-on withdrawal remains unclear. With Assad's regime overthrown, Russia's military position in Syria is highly unstable. Many observers doubt that the new government will be keen to work with Russia, as they were on opposing sides of the civil war. The Kremlin, however, is trying to display a positive front.
By and large, we have achieved our goals. And even those groups that once fought with the Assad regime, with the government forces, they too have undergone internal changes.
Ukrainian intelligence has also been reporting that Russia is packing up much of its military equipment currently located in Syria. Russian military aircraft have been spotted flying between Syria and Libya, with the equipment being allegedly delivered to Russian-friendly bases in the latter. For Ukraine, of course, this would signal a weakening of Russia's position in the region and be an opportunity for new alliances.
From a strategic perspective, the elimination of Russia's presence in Syria will contribute to the stability of not only the Syrian state, but the entire Middle East and Africa.
The reported shift to Libya would mean that Russia is far from giving up on its ambitions for North Africa and even in the Middle East. While the options available to Moscow will be fewer, the Russians will still have more than one card to play from their hand.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. Libya, once ruled by the late Muammar Gaddafi, has been a country in conflict since that regime fell apart back in 2011. Several factions have tried to stake their claim in the resulting power vacuum, and one of them apparently invited Russia to the party. As if the situation wasn't complicated enough, you now have European nations side-eyeing Russia's presence there. And why? Well, because a stronger Russian foothold in North Africa could pose a threat to NATO and the European Union from the south. The presence of Russian mercenary groups, such as the infamous Wagner Group, now renamed the Africa Corps, is another big reason world leaders are increasingly jumpy. These private contractors are involved in everything from security to special operations, which is code for the things governments don't want to claim. And there is nothing like private military contractors to make an already messy conflict absolutely impossible to read. Picture a torrent of competing militias, foreign soldiers and local warlords all trying to get a piece of Libya, and you'll start to understand why observers are increasingly worried. The underlying concern is that Russia's expansion into Libya could give it a say over critical shipping lanes in the Mediterranean and an expanded role in controlling Europe's energy supply. Sure, many in the West say that will never happen. Europe is strong, NATO is strong, no big deal. However, ignoring the potential threat is like ignoring the subtle cough you've had for 6 months. I'll just walk it off, you say, as you ironically collapse into a plush coffin-shaped bed. And let's not forget that Russia has shown quite the appetite for expanding its sphere of influence, from Syria to Crimea. Now, Libya might be next on its menu, and when the Kremlin sets the table, it's usually other countries who end up with heartburn. Yet, if we learned anything from the last decade, it's that ignoring small problems can make them explode into really big ones. Libya's strategic location near Europe means that any chaos or militarization there could quickly morph into a security crisis for nearby nations. However, it's important to note that Libya is not just a chessboard for global powers. Every new foreign intervention, be it Russian or otherwise, carries huge repercussions for civilians, worried about where their next meal is coming from, how to find medicines, or how to keep their kids safe. But those concerns don't always make the headlines. So, what can be done? Well, for starters, international bodies could ramp up diplomacy, help mediate a Libyan political settlement, and address the underlying conflicts fueling the chaos. Meanwhile, if Russia's presence continues to grow unchecked, you can expect further tensions, covert skirmishes, and a bigger scramble by NATO and the European Union to protect their interests. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Nassim Abi-Ghanem, Middle East expert from the Bard College, Berlin. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
So it seems that Russia may actually have a new objective, relocating its regional power center, especially when it comes to the military, from Syria to Libya. What does this signify for the region? Do you think that the repercussions could be serious within the next few months and years?
Well, we have to understand that actually the Russia's involvement in Libya is nothing new. Russia's involvement through the African Corps, which was previously referred to as the Wagner Group, have been on their support to Haftar supported regions in Libya has been ongoing since 2019. And so in essence, their involvement is not new, and their intention to open their geopolitical influence on Africa has been a long-term goal for the Russians. This was usually happening through the Hamaymim air base in Syria and in Tartus. And of course, with the fall of the Assad regime, Haftar becomes a much better proxy and a much better ally for the Russians. And so this is why now we see this pivot. This is a very challenging, of course, and it's very challenging for Europe because Russia becomes now in more control of the migration routes from Africa, but also energy supplies and trade corridors. And the other danger is also any peace process that has been instigated recently for Libya between the Haftar and the Western-backed government in Tripoli will also see tremendous disruptions and perhaps even a complete failure. Because of this bolstering support of Haftar that he will get through the Russians' pivot.
So let's talk about leverage. What leverage would Russia gain over countries in the region? I'm talking in particular about European countries. You've already mentioned energy. What about the military situation in the Mediterranean?
Yes, of course. I mean, again, the Russian involvement has been ongoing. I mean, with the African Corps, there's already a strong control for these groups in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in Niger. And we also how this was detrimental for the French troops in Mali several years ago. And if this consolidation of mercenary type warfare continues, then this will only increase the chaos, and that chaos is in favor of the Russian policy, in a way that maintaining these deals and bargains with the local guerrilla and militias for trade and support, rather than the strong state institutions, and that's exactly what the Russians would prefer. In Africa, and of course, this is contrary to actually what the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative would want. The Chinese plans in Africa would much rather have a more secure states for their investments. For the several Chinese employees that will be located in Africa. And this kind of disruption also increases the leverage of the Russians with the Chinese.
So we have the possible instability in Africa. We also have the Mediterranean, where, again, Russia may wish to increase its presence, perhaps drawing away attention from the Baltic in case of any sort of possible conflict with NATO countries. But just how stable would be Russian presence in Libya? Because this hinges upon the idea that the Haftar regime would be fairly long-lasting. Right? It would not be just, a flash in the pan, collapsing all of a sudden. And arguably, Russia might have had similar calculations with regard to Syria. They were thinking, okay, no problem. We have a stable ally, except all of a sudden, this stability has morphed into extreme volatility and then the collapse of the Assad regime. So what do you think about the situation in Libya right now? If Russia is betting on this regime being there to last, is this a safe bet for the Kremlin?
That's a very good question. Actually, one can draw a lot of similarities between Haftar and Bashar al-Assad in the sense that they are both trying to build a family dynasty. We can see already Haftar trying to hone his sons to rule these regions. And of course, they're all relying on service provisions and the services that they can provide to their constituencies that are very loyal to them. I mean, we can remember that actually Russia printed the counterfeit Libyan dinars to support Haftar's campaigns previously. So they're very similar kind of leaders, extremely dependent on Russia. And in that sense, actually, one could wonder on the future prospects of the Haftar family if they are not able to consolidate and keep supporting their bases, just like the Assad failed to continue to support his army, and eventually there was no one to defend him.
So what about the domestic situation? Because this also matters, like, is there enough momentum, for example, among the opposition forces at some point to topple that regime? Because this was clearly the case in Syria, also because the Russians, with their methods, and of course the methods used by the Assad regime itself, they caused extreme resentment and hostility among those who wanted to get rid of that regime, which in the end they did.
Absolutely. So far, there's no such signs, but we have to also look at the previous couple of weeks where many of the European generals also and the West have opened some channels of communication with Haftar, trying to convince him to come onto the negotiation table. And so there is some sort of communication challenge. And also, we must not forget that Turkey has a strong foothold in Libya. And we've seen what Turkey has done in support of the HTS in Syria. So Turkey's presence in Libya may also have some influence in that regard in instigating such movements within the Haftar controlled regions. So far, there's no such evidence, but it continues to be a bit volatile, and Russia may be already aware of that. But as you mentioned previously, anywhere where Russia can exert some influence to imbalance some places for Western allies in juxtaposition with what could happen in Ukraine, Russia would try its best to do so. Whether that would be extremely successful or not is yet to be seen. And in the short term, perhaps it would. Haftar would definitely welcome this, would definitely join in, and would love this support that would come. But on the long run, there's a lot of lessons to learn from Syria, for sure.
And what about the approach of the West? Because some people say, okay, so we need to, as you said, try to encourage Mr. Haftar to the negotiating table, to join in and become involved with a long-lasting peace process. But do you think that this is going to solve anything? Like, because some people are suggesting, okay, we would need to ensure institutional stability for Libya itself. And the West was not exactly good at ensuring these conditions in many countries in the Middle East and Africa. It's a different thing to say you need to introduce reforms without actually providing any sort of tangible support, because if you're just, if it's just words against tangible support from the likes of Putin, then Putin arguably is going to have a stronger argument. So do you think that the West actually does have any incentives in this current situation, which would not look desperate, knowing that, all of a sudden you have a Russian threat moving to Libya and everyone is just scrambling to come up with ideas. Perhaps they should have come up with ideas a decade ago, or 5 years ago.
Absolutely, and this is the biggest challenge to the Western states. There has been some sort of ignoring the Libyan question. Meanwhile, as you rightly mentioned, the Western-backed government has been under severe pressure for corruption scandals and governance. And so, of course, it might be a bit too late, given that the support now that the Russians would provide for Haftar would be exert much more influence on the constituencies. And it would definitely mean that any peace process in the short term would likely to now be halted, because there's absolutely nothing of ripeness in it. There is no mutually hurting stalemate for anyone. In fact, for the Haftar troops, they will be bolstered and they will have a strong military presence, and even stronger than what when they thought they had a strong one back in 2019, and now they will even have more. They will have aerial support. So definitely any peace process is now severely deterred. And for the Western states, this is a grave concern, given that their supported government is also is corrupt, is under severe pressure. And the hope was that opening channels with both, trying to reach some sort of mediation, will at least provide some peace and then some time to build the institutions and the rule of law and all others. And as it stands now, it seems to be as another deadlock geopolitically. So these challenges will remain, unfortunately, for Europe and the Western allies. And perhaps I would say looking at supporting different kind of government in Tripoli would be one way forward for the crisis that they might find themselves in.
Nassim Abi Ghanem was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you absolutely don't want to miss. 2 telecom cables running between Finland and Estonia under the Baltic Sea have been repaired, according to Finnish operator Elisa. Investigators suspect the cables were severed by an anchor belonging to the Eagle S oil tanker.
Finnish authorities are investigating the sabotage of 4 telecom cables and 1 power cable on December 25th of last year. In addition to the 2 fixed telecom cables, one running between Finland and Germany is expected to be repaired later this month. There is no deadline for the final telecom cable or the power cable called S-Link 2, though some estimates slate the latter's repair for mid-2025. These acts of purported sabotage came just weeks after other vital infrastructure cables were severed in the region of the Baltic Sea. Experts and politicians alike believe that these acts of sabotage are part of the hybrid war currently being waged on Europe by Russia. Although investigators say there is compelling evidence for the presence of the Eagle S vessel to have cut the cables, law enforcement will be the ones who will determine who was responsible for the sabotage. The Eagle S is believed to be a shadow ship, a vessel of dubious ownership with ties to Russia. The ship's captain and one of the crew members are Georgian nationals. The entire crew of the Eagle S has been detained by Finnish authorities as the investigation is pending.
Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev has accused Russia of causing the crash of an Azerbaijani airplane on the 25th of December. According to some witness statements and preliminary evidence, the plane was likely shot down by Russian air defense systems.
President Aliyev seems to be becoming impatient with the investigation into the crash of the Azerbaijan Airlines flight. He has gone so far as to criticize Vladimir Putin over not admitting his country's fault for the incident during a meeting with the victims' families and surviving crew members. Aliyev had previously condemned how Moscow handled the incident. He accused Russian agencies of suppressing evidence and promoting, to quote, absurd versions of events. He also blamed Russia for failing to close its airspace near Grozny in Chechnya to maintain safety. At Azerbaijan's request, the aircraft's black boxes were decoded in Brazil to maintain impartiality. The Azerbaijan Airlines flight was en route from Baku to Grozny before it changed course and crashed in Kazakhstan. Multiple reports and several official Azerbaijani statements have said that a Russian Panzer-S air defense system missile had caused the crash. 38 out of the plane's 67 passengers were killed in the disaster. Since the incident occurred in Kazakh territory, Astana is leading the investigation while trying to cool tensions between Azerbaijan and Russia.
The electricity situation in the breakaway Moldovan region of Transnistria is becoming dire in the wake of Russia cutting gas supplies on the 1st of January. Moscow had cut off gas transit to Moldova over an alleged financial dispute.
Transnistria's residents are facing a total power blackout. The region's authorities have reportedly been unable to provide hot water and heating to over 70,000 homes as temperatures are hitting sub-zero degrees. Many people have been forced to burn wood or rely on plug-in electric heaters, though neither solution is seen as permanent should power supplies not be restored. The massive surge in demand for electricity has put incredible strain on Transnistria's Soviet-era power grid, which is on the brink of collapse. The situation has led to severe tensions between Moldova and Russia. Chisinau has summoned one of Moscow's diplomats in the wake of accusations over the energy crisis in Transnistria. The Moldovan government spokesperson said that the situation in the breakaway region was part of a broader Russian plan to manipulate and spread propaganda. The comments came after Russia's gas giant Gazprom had halted deliveries to Moldova, basing its decision on supposed unpaid debts of the Moldovan operator Moldova Gas. Moldovan officials have disputed these claims, saying that an international audit had failed to verify the debts.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Bye for now.